Well, welcome back.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And we wanted to start this session with just some feedback from you guys on your last session, maybe that you just had that we weren't a part of, or the previous session that Brock and Jaime were running, and see if you had any insights since or any questions that popped up for you. You're just taking it all in. Yeah.
Well, so I was in the
sugar addiction.
Yeah. And I've been curious about this idea of like really in the global scale of talking about addiction, like just with what we're talking about, like we all are sort of on some level addicted to our own thinking. And I find that fascinating. And in the realm of whatever we're choosing, you know, whether it's sugar, or alcohol, or what, you know, whatever it is, or just our thoughts, how we actually come to make a choice to do it differently. And because sometimes we know what to do. It's not, you know, with sugar addiction or with something with alcohol. I mean, that sugar is my thing, but I didn't have alcohol, but I can speak to the sugar part. But, you know, it's not like you don't know what to do, or when you're having thoughts and you're in the midst of whatever, you know, it's not like you might not have an inkling of doing it in a different way, but you don't always make that choice. And so I'm sort of sitting with that curiosity, and for myself, and also in sitting with others, you know, how to, like, what is that? Like you mentioned in our earlier session about, you know, I'm trying to think how you said it, but to me, I heard it as to that point, and I can't think of how you said it, but it's like it's always happening, and so that's where I'm at and what I'm thinking about. Is that sort of what, I mean, you wanted to hear where we're sort of at from less?
That's what you're thinking.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Well, yeah. Well, and the question about, like, what about those times when we know better, but we're not doing better?
Yeah.
And I hear that a lot when working with youth. He knows what he's doing. He's just choosing not to. She knows better, okay? And the way that I like to frame that question, or I like to reverse it, and the evidence that you truly know better is when you are doing better. And I think that the distinction is the difference between knowing something here and knowing something here. Yeah. It's the difference between it being a good idea to cut back on sugar and actually realizing that you feel better, or realizing that you have to just make it through the detox, or just, it's that realizing that is that difference, okay? And in terms of the principles, that's, as we talked about in the other sessions in the big group about that defining moment. Last night, they talked about there's that moment where it clicks. A good idea becomes real, or it's just obvious. I gotta stop, or I gotta cut back. And it's no different with youth. They do the same thing. You know? They'll say, how many of you have worked with kids that have had anger problems, or kids in your class, and you ask them, well, what do you need to do when you get angry? What do they normally say? I call them the big three. What are the big three when it comes to anger? Typical things that kids say to help with their anger.
Hit someone.
Count to 10. Take deep breaths. And walk away. That's the three. That's the big three. You will always hear those three, right? And but what happens when they get angry? It all goes out the window, doesn't it? Well, it's because, yeah, not just with them, but now teaching them about, well, what's happening when you count to 10? What's happening when you take deep breaths? The fact that it makes sense to you to walk away. Because if I think you're making me mad, I ain't walking away. You need to walk away. Or you need to count to 10, okay? So that's an example of something that's intellectual, that they could pass a test on it, they could repeat it back to you, and then we think he knows better. But see, it depends on how you define knowing. If you say know better, meaning that they actually do it, that's not knowing better in my mind, right? So when it comes to addictions or when it comes to any poor choices, when I'm making mistakes, instead of judging myself for oh, I knew better, and I'm still, it's, okay, what am I missing? What am I misunderstanding? What am I not seeing? Procrastination, every New Year's I say I'm going to quit procrastinating and never get around to it. So it's like procrastination is my thing. Why do I wait till the last minute? I know better. I know I get stressed. I know that there's always something else that comes up. Well, there's something I'm missing about procrastination. There's something about the principles in terms of how thought is working in me that I'm missing. And so is that connected what you were talking about with this? Yeah.
Yeah, it's curious,
Mm-hmm. And if you stay curious, because curiosity, when you stay curious, like, I wonder what that's about, you'll get a new thought. But if you're like, I know what it is, I've got this or I've got that, I'd much rather work with a parent who's curious about the behavior than convinced. Because, and I don't care how silly their explanations are, I think she has an anger problem because she's just a fiery redhead. I think it's because she's got red hair that she's, but I could be wrong. I don't know. That's why I brought her here. I'm curious. Then to have someone who says, oh, I know why she has an anger problem. I've read all these books on attachment disorders. I adopted her when she was 3, and they're convinced that they know what the problem is. She has bipolar. It's 3 generations. And so staying curious opens you up to new thinking. And especially when it comes to working with kids. Yes?
You said something earlier this morning that was so profound, and I cannot remember how you said it, but it was something about children or adults that haven't grown up, and adults are still, I can't get it, but it speaks to what you were talking about earlier, because I fall into the same trap of, I'm the adult, I deserve your respect.
Yeah.
And it's and all of a sudden, I'm the one knee-jerk reacting. And then the reactions are just, we're in a tennis match. So can you say that again?
Yeah.
Because it was.
Well, yeah, so I was saying that children are adults that haven't grown up yet, and adults are grown-up children.
Grown-up
really.
Yeah. I knew it was something simple.
And, it's kind of like the fact that I deserve respect is a thought.
Yeah.
I don't think about, I do react to kids being disrespectful at times, okay? But I don't really, it's not that big a deal to me. Like, when they're being disrespectful, some people have a real hard time with respect. Some people have a hard time with honesty. Like, they want to be, if a kid lies to them, that's the worst thing they can do, okay? And so they get reactive about lying instead of, and so then they try to get them not to lie. And now the root of lying is fear. And so if you're going to use fear to try to get rid of the fear, it's gonna increase the lying. They'll just get better at it, by the way. They'll practice their lying, and so instead of doing that, you say, okay, well, what do they even know the benefits of being honest? Like, why be honest? Why not just because because it's about trust, and okay, well, and then you're able to come up with ways to to teach lessons that are pointing back to the truth instead of punitive, reactive. If you have to say, I'm in charge here, well, you're probably not in charge. The kids know that. Yes, bro.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to your comment. When we were talking about the track and the initial sections and how it flow, that was one of the topics that came up about rapport and connection, what gets in the way, and a lot of times it's your role that you're in, that your identity or the way you identify your role is thought too. So we go in saying, okay, well, I'm the helper, right? I'm the therapist, or I'm the teacher, I'm the one who should know, or I should have the answers, or whatever it is. They should listen to me, they should respect me. All of that is thought that is a little film, even if it's just a slight film, but it's something that is getting in the way, that's lowering your reception, lowering your bars.
Mhm.
And so, somebody this morning, is it Heather, is that your name? You were talking about the thing, for you, the different things that get in the way, that it's just thinking you're having that's getting in the way. Well, that's another example. It's just thinking that we have about, well, I'm the parent, and or I'm this, and you're this, and once we start to have thinking that's identifying the child or identifying their roles and stuff, really, and we get real attached to that we have to be careful. Doesn't mean we just throw out roles and boundaries and all that, but we just have to be careful about not letting that get in the way.
I'm curious, I'd like to hear from James on this, because as a principal, as a school administrator, I know growing up, the principal, there was a lot of like, oh, the principal's office. Even to this day, if someone says, the COO wants you, it's like, ooh, you're going to the principal's office. And so there's this somewhat built-in respect that kids tend to have. But the kids that you work with, a lot of them have a built-in disrespect for authority figures. So could you say a little bit about how you manage that with your role and how you connect with kids and get beyond that role or that wall that might be built up?
It's a long story, Jamie. Long story.
We got plenty of time.
Good. I was thinking of some things when Brock was speaking. As a matter of fact, we were talking on the phone about that very idea about how you wield your authority and how you walk in your role. So the first thing you have to know is, for me, I'm going to use the word introspective, and I've come at education from outside of education, so I've had to learn it all. So there has been for me just a concern that I don't have every answer. Now, I don't know if other principals who were trained this way from the very beginning, trained in education from the very beginning, I don't know if they are more confident about those things, but that reflective piece for me is huge. And I have a few experiences where I've shown up on the scene where there is a problem and played my big card right up front. You're going to get out of here right now. And the student says, no, I'm not. And where am I going from here?
Yeah.
Just played my trump card right out of the box and didn't work. So that experience makes me now approach students very, very quietly and slowly, because what they need is someone safe to get them out of this situation often. So I will approach and watch as other adults are interacting with them. And if I can make eye contact, typically I will just give them a come here, or say, young man, come with me, and turn and start to walk. They, by that time, know who I am. They know what the role is. They're in the middle of what must feel like chaos or some unsafe situation. And here's the door out. That seems to work for me. I have colleagues who will still try to do it in different ways, and it doesn't always work for them. So, but I think that has a lot to do with who I think I am and who I'm supposed to be, or what my role is supposed to be. And so if I stay in the position of I'm here to help, then I'm able to pull that off. The moment I walk through the doors and I'm thinking, I'm sick of you, kid, cursing out everybody, I've got a problem, because now I can't even access the walk or the talk. Even when I try to do this, I'm doing it in a different way. And the kid hears, the kid senses, get your butt over here, even though I've not spoken a word. So you really have to.
It sounds like you're in service.
Right.
Your intent is in love to help this kid, which I think is like foundational for all of us human beings.
Mhm.
The bottom line is we all just want to be loved, right? So that's kind of where the heart is for me. And obviously we do this. I'm not always up here, but when that comes out, that's like that deep feeling of, I just want to help you.
Right.
They
Right.
can feel that.
Well, and I think what James was saying, I got to sit on one of his faculty meetings very recently, and what he just spoke to just now is what he was talking to his teachers about is, in what ways are we showing them that they can feel safe? And so if there's judgment or are like predisposed ideas about who you are, they already don't feel safe. Share with the Steve Irwin thing that he's had, because I thought it was so beautiful.
Sure.
But basically what he was trying to get all of the faculty to see is they can feel you.
Mhm.
You don't have to say a word, they can feel you. And are you in service to them, or are you trying to get them to come and do what you want them to do?
Well, there are a couple of things with that. The first thing is I've understood sort of like what you're saying, probably with all of us, we have this theme song. We have this running dialogue that is who we are. It's our thought, and it's how we define ourselves. I think every person has that. And sadly, I believe that there are some people, young people, who they're walking around in the theme that's playing in their head is victim or target or something that's not so confident and so strong and so comfortable just with everyone. So that's important because sometimes kids feel that off of other kids and we feel it off of them. You've passed by people who are quiet and reserved and not doing anything in particular to get your attention, and you have felt, what's going on with her? That happens to us. And most of the time we're right about what their theme is. And so I do believe that young people definitely can feel what our theme is. So they kind of know who's here to help and who's out to get them. And sadly, there are some adults who are out to get them. So I just used to love watching the Crocodile Hunter, and it was always funny to me how he would just grab a hold, I'm talking about Steve Irwin, and he would just pick up whatever this creature was. And so I'm going you anyway, because I'm a girly man. I don't pick up newts and geckos and snakes and stuff. I just don't do that. Never have. But he would always say, now this little bugger is not going to hurt me. He would say, it's got enough poison in it to kill 10 men, but it's not going to hurt me because he knows I'm not going to hurt him. They know. They can tell. And I think the way you handle students, they can sense what your intentions are. Part of the conversation with my staff on that day is, depending on where we are at any given time, what's bogging us down, what's blocking us, what's keeping us from not being our best self. That's how well we're able to interact with students and make them feel safe, emotionally, or even physically sometimes, I suppose. I think I spoke about a moment where there was a young lady on campus who I had not really only seen her a couple of days, and she walked past 2 or 3 different staff members, and we have a uniform policy, and we're always saying, shirt tucked in, young lady tuck in the shirt, and we say it in different ways. One particular person on campus has a few people have really big voices, one male in particular, and he always uses it. Young man, you just tuck that shirt in. That's the 3rd time I do it, you know. And so the kids are always kind of recoiling. So I don't know if it was him or who it was. Someone said, tuck your shirt, and the young lady just muttered something under her breath. I was standing nearby, and I said, tuck your shirt in, sweetheart. She looked at me. And she turned and started walking in a different direction. So I kind of approached from behind and said, sweetheart, if you go ahead and tuck it in, we'll leave you alone about it. And she just turned and looked at me like that. And I said, what's your name? I don't think I've met you yet. She said, she had a little badge on it. I said, well, it's nice to meet you. And I have mine on one of those little retractable deals. So I in her face. And I think she saw principal. Now, I don't know what she thought, in that moment. I don't know if she just really responded to the fact that, holy smokes, I was just rude to the principal. I don't know if she thought, he's the principal? Why didn't he yell? I don't know what she thought, but she froze. She said, okay. I said, yeah, if you tuck it in, I promise we'll leave you alone. And she was okay. I use that example with my staff because we're in and out in that little exchange of the student feeling safe and not safe. Safe and not safe. Safe and not safe. So for us, if we can find a place of consistency with the way we address them, I think we give them a better chance at doing what we need them to do. And then we have access to their brains then, because they'll hear us.
So basically, the punitive way of responding makes them feel unsafe. That's so when I'm, chastising a child, they're feeling unsafe. They're feeling like maybe I don't care. That's what I'm starting to feel through this discussion.
For me, there's being punitive and then there's correction. And so what are you trying to do in the moment when you're addressing a student? Am I trying to punish the student for a wrong, or am I trying to correct a behavior pattern?
Okay, so maybe I'm not using the right word. So when I think of punitive, I think of, okay, I started teaching recorders to my students. Okay, so of course we talk about all the different things you need to do. One of the things I say is that please do not play. Now, I don't say it that nice. Now that I think about it. Do not play until it's time for all of us to play. So I'm passing out the recorders. You have them rest position. And invariably, they play. So I said, okay, Heather, this is not working. So I said, maybe I should come in and say, okay, everybody just play what you want to play for the next minute. Stop. And I'm just trying to think of what to do to have them to respond the way that I would prefer for them to respond for all of our benefits, because a lot of recorders sounding all these ways is just piercing to all of our ears. And then they're not learning. And then so I don't know. So when I say punitive, I mean when I'm kind of like chastising you, my voice is elevated, or, something that I feel like I shouldn't do, but I'm doing because I think that's the only way they're going to respond. What is my question?
Well, I think you kind of answered your question. I think you are, the fact that you brought it up is you're sort of acknowledging that it doesn't work so well to be that way about it. Now, the cool thing about when our heads are quiet down, or when we're present, or when we're in service, is that things occur to us in the moment to say or do that surprise us. So it's not like James did, I'm going to do the badge technique, like that occurred to him in the moment. Okay. Another great story that a principal who we met and we were going to do some work with, and he was just one of those guys that he just had that feeling about him just naturally. And he told this story about a kid, first day of school, this kid, was in middle school, he was running down the hall and ran into him. And the kid, he says, whoa, watch out, watch where you're going. And this kid looked up at the principal and said, who the F are you? Okay, and he used the word. And the principal said, I'm the effing principal, who are you? And he said, and they had a great relationship from that point. Because he was in the moment, and he did not personalize it. He got on his level, he connected with him. And it disarmed, like in your story, it was kind of disarming, like, wait a minute, she could feel that you cared. And the thing is that when you have that connection, you can get away with losing your bearings and being punitive at times, okay? They'll give you grace. They're less likely, they're more likely to say, well, so-and-so just in a bad mood today, and they may roll their eyes, but there is things will occur to you to do that will guide you in how you're intervening. And that's one of the hardest things to teach. If you're talking about with the teachers and faculty, if you just have this intent that I want to help them and not hurt them, and if they could feel that, if you're just going in that direction, instead of how can I fix them or change them.
Mm.
I just don't want them to feel like I'm here to hurt them. And, but it's teaching about how things occur to you, and there's no technique for it, you know? Like you say something one day and it's like, wow, that went great. And then and the next day you're like, I got this.
You're throwing your
I
badge at
got
everyone.
this.
It's not
Yeah.
working.
And you pull from your
One shot.
vault of things that you've said, and then it falls flat.
Absolutely.
So that's that responsiveness of being in connection with the other person.
One thing that occurred to me while you were saying that is, how do you get to that place where you can be present with those kids and to be able to trust your wisdom and have things like this happen for you? Like, I want to be there, especially with my kids, right? How do you get to that place? Is it, well, one thing that came up to me was an analogy with driving a car. You may have heard this analogy before, but when you've got low oil, say it's not an electric vehicle, it's low oil and it's flashing, it's an alarm to tell you you've got something wrong with your vehicle, right? And so we as humans have a flashing thing to let us know that we're not doing so well, and we're maybe not in that good, that sort of wisdom-filled, calm place that we should be, right? All the time, although that never happens. And that's our feelings. So when you've got crappy feelings, you know, you're sick, or you woke up on the wrong side of the bed, if you want to call it that, or whatever it is. When you're feeling crappy, then don't trust your wisdom to come up with anything, because you're not open to accessing it, right? I guess for me, that's, you know, why am I saying this right now? This is not coming from a place of you know, calm and happy and loving and positive. This is me. I'm angry right now. So zip it.
Yeah. You know, it's occurring to me that it's even when we're misbehaving or not acting out of insecurity, our wisdom is still helping us the best it can, given the state we're in. So when a kid is disrespectful, or when a kid is defiant, that's their wisdom helping them at the level that they're at. So there's two major factors in negative behavior. It's their understanding and it's their state of mind. Now, focusing just on state of mind won't have long-term results. Just teaching kids coping skills and just focusing on meditating. There's a difference between your understanding and your state. You can be in a really bad state, in a really bad mood. But if you understand what's going on, you're going to weather it. You're going to let it come and go. But if you're in a really good state and you have a low understanding, you're going to think, oh, I'm having a great day because life is great, and because you're going to have external reasons. And then what happens when those things change? Then you're at the mercy of them. So a client comes to me and she's depressed because her boyfriend broke up with her. And then, so she's in a low state, in a low understanding. And the next week she comes back. I'm feeling great. Really? That's awesome. Yeah, we got back together. Okay. So her understanding, her state of mind is going to be jerked around by her lack of understanding. So now, just understanding that the feeling you're in is not telling you about a bunch of kids making noise or about them being disrespectful. It's telling you about where you're coming from. And what that does is that opens you up to creative ideas. For example, you know what? Maybe I should wait to give it to them until it's time. You know, like maybe it's something that I'm doing that could, you come up with a creative solution. Maybe it's better not to have all the kids in the hallway at one time. You know, these common sense solutions will start to come to you about how to even prevent it to begin with. And so But the negative behavior, it's still their wisdom giving them the best that they've got available based on what they're seeing in that moment, based on what makes sense to them. They're doing what makes sense to them. We have a kid at the group home that he talks to adults like their peers. I mean, he's so disrespectful, but he would talk to any of us like he would cut on you. He treated you like a peer. He grew up in an environment where he was elevated to that level of being an adult. He was exposed to adult conversation. He was not allowed to be a child. So in his mind, it makes perfect sense. So when you tell him not to be disrespectful, he's like, you don't be disrespectful. When you see acting out behaviors, it's coming from their understanding and it's innocent. And that helps you to maintain a nice feeling as well.
I would be interested to know from some of you you've given some examples about exactly what you do and what you need from this. I mean, you want some specifics on solutions, but I'm curious as to whether there's anyone else who can say, well, I really need to be able to address this type of situation.
I forgot to say, if you don't want to be recorded or if you don't want to be videotaped, just say Blueberry when you start. I forgot to say that, sorry. If you say Blueberry instead, last time I said don't raise your hand, but then people are raising their hands maybe to record or maybe not to be recorded or because they don't have a question. So.
I thought you were going to say if you don't want to be recorded, just too bad. Like
See your way out.
Yeah, the door's out back there. Get over it. It's all thought. Okay. Sorry. Thanks, God.
You will be filmed.
Yeah. And we promise that you'll get royalties. You'll get a percentage. Percentage of what we've all made.
You get your cut.
Yeah, exactly. No, I like that. Other questions. I mean, we could go different directions. We had a general agenda, and yeah.
As I introduced myself before, I'm Margaret from Uganda, Africa. I'm living in a place whereby so many students are being okay with the tough circumstances, whereby most parents cannot afford the pencil, cannot afford the book, cannot afford the shoe, cannot afford the dressing up a child, cannot afford the education. How can we going to get together so that we can support such children to bring a change into themselves?
Are you asking how you're going to?
How are you going to help us so that we can bring a change to such kind of children?
That's tough because it just sounds like that's a matter of first these needs being met. And I don't know if you're saying that these financial needs are not being met, that you need agencies to support their basic needs for supplies, what have you. Is that what you're asking? Or are you saying under those circumstances, how do we get them to feel well and successful?
Yeah. How do we make them get dressed, get education, so that at least they can also feel like others?
What have you tried so far?
I'm trying to create, the current situation where I'm living, so that at least you can stand with those children to bring a change upon the education and their living.
This may sound like a dumb question, but what would education do for the kid? Like in your mind, what do you see as education? How does that help the children?
I'm sure when a child goes to school is exposed rather than not getting any education, that one there's a difference between the two. What I'm trying to drive to is that if we could at least stand with them by educating them, dressing them up, buying them some education essentials like pencils, books. At least I'm sure we'll bring a change today.
Okay. I've got two answers to your question, okay? One is a big picture answer, and then there's a little picture answer. So the big picture answer, in my mind, is that all over the world, that there are conditions, there's selfishness in systems all over the world that lead to these circumstances, okay? And there are all kinds of people and groups that are trying to improve that in some way, but when egos get involved, it really makes it tough. So you have a system, there's a system problem. Okay, that's now, but the smaller picture is, if you look at your class or you look at children and you see some of them that there is different circumstances in the room, and you'll see some who have better circumstances and you'll have than others, but you'll notice that doesn't necessarily mean that the ones with better circumstances are happier or better behaved than the ones with poor circumstances. You'll see moments when they're totally enjoying their life and they feel at peace and they're doing great. And now, I totally agree that education and having the basic needs are essential. So that's not my claim here, okay? But I've seen kids playing football with a shoe and having the best time, and then seeing privileged kids with all kinds of equipment having a terrible time. That the ability for them to have well-being and to enjoy life is before having shoes or having education or okay? So education is great and it's important in terms of, it's an essential thing in my mind. But when it comes to well-being, mental well-being, even the kids in the most horrendous conditions, you'll see them have well-being at times. And you'll see some people in great conditions who don't have well-being. So one of the messages from this whole weekend is that our feelings aren't connected to our circumstances. So there are kids who don't have shoes, who've never had shoes, and they don't care if they have shoes. And then there are kids who don't have shoes, and they're thinking, well, I don't have them because I need them to be happy because she has them and I don't. So I'm not saying that that you leave it alone. That's not the message here. Mm-hmm. The message is that the ability for them to be okay is separate from that. And when you're able to separate that, then you can put your heart and soul into helping them in any way possible. Because you have the energy and the wisdom and the creativity to try to come up with solutions and ways to this is making sense to you? Okay. I don't know if you guys want to take a shot at it. It's a tough one.
I thought that was fabulous because I was scratching my head.
Yeah.
How to approach that. That's tough.
The only thing that occurred to me was it's an inside-out world that we live in. So though education, pencils, clothing are all fantastic, and I'm glad you're not all naked, our well-being is not determined by that. It comes from inside of us, as opposed to, well, now that I'm educated, I'm going to be mentally well, right? So it's remembering that. I forget it all the time.
Right.
Yeah, so I get asked a lot of times, so you're saying my problems, this is like a devil's advocate question, but so you're saying that my problems don't really exist, that I'm not really in debt, or that I really don't have this medical condition, or are you trying to say, blah, 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 you fill in the blank, right? And those are your circumstances, and then there are times where I get that same question, like, I'm saying this 1 minute, and then the next minute I'm asking that question.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because we always get fooled all the time, And the answer that I love is just that it's not that you're not in debt anymore, okay? But the fact that you're in debt bothers you one minute, doesn't bother you the next. It's not on your mind at all. You don't even think about it the next. So it's not, that's not the factor. The factor is what's going on with you. And your ability to dig yourself out of that hole, your ability to create solutions for the tangible problems. It's either, like I mentioned earlier, it's either empowered or disempowered based on where you at, so where you are. So, so you're either going to be setting yourself up for making it better or worse, right? And it could be getting out of debt and losing weight, or you know, if you're burning more calories than you're consuming, then it doesn't mean that you're all of a sudden not going to be overweight, but you're going to be gradually moving in that direction. Your trajectory is going to be positive. So we're gradually moving in that direction. And one of the things Dickens said in the last workshop was about humanity as a whole is if one person, their level of consciousness goes up, then the whole level of consciousness in the world has gone up, even by a small degree. That's the answer to improving our world's problems over time. And it's very complex from a content perspective, but in principle, it's very simple, and that's what spawned the whole One Solution initiative. It's like, look, there's only one problem we have, ultimately.
We're all just one drop in the ocean. Did you have a question?
I was just going to add,
Blueberry.
in addition to our well-being not being tied to our circumstances, we tie our circumstances to what we can do. My wife is a perfect example. My wife doesn't believe she can accomplish anything. She really honestly doesn't believe it. She just doesn't care about it. It doesn't affect her. So she got this conference going. She took a credit card, no payment credit card, put $20,000 down, and she's going to pay for the conference over time. That, for me, completely blows my mind. I think I have to have money to do something. And so I don't do a lot of things. The moment I decouple that, amazing things are possible that I didn't think were even on the table, even remotely in my purview of possibility. And seeing the inside out nature of that lets us see something fresh. And the solutions will show up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really, oh yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna piggyback on that. When you think about the kids as well, the same thing applies. The less we dig into their circumstances and think that's a reason that they are limited, the more they'll see that in themselves, that they aren't limited. So, you know, when working with kids that have all sorts of baggage, which we all do, and you've seen obviously, the less we dig into, well, they're this way because of X, Y, and Z, and the more that we see them as whole people inside and their health within, it'll cultivate within themselves, and they'll come up with their own solutions.
And on a very small practical level, if you think that if you think your well-being is tied to their behavior, then they're going to be pushing your buttons all day long, you know? And so just knowing deep down that it's not connected doesn't mean that you don't get pulled in. It's ultimately not connected. That helps you to be open to those creative solutions that you didn't think were possible. And it helps you to listen to them without the judgment, because if you know that they have wisdom inside them, they have common sense, and that your answers don't matter. Their answers are what matters. It's not what you say, it's what they hear. That will help you to be open to listening to them rather than wanting to preach to them or talk at them.
I have a short story. My son is going to this tutoring, which he is not excited about, so I'm sure you can imagine. And I pick him up from school and I take him there every day. And every day he complains about it. So he gets in the car and how was your day? And he gets in this, now I gotta go here mode. And we have maybe 150 feet till we leave the parking lot. And he starts getting into it and I'm thinking, oh, here we go again. And for some reason I stopped myself from reacting to him, because normally we would, have this conversation all the way to the tutoring session. So for some reason I stopped and I just let him talk. And before we left the parking lot, he was finished and he looked at me because I wasn't saying anything. And he goes, well, so what do you have to say about that? Aren't you going to engage with me? And I just was laughing because I thought, this is brilliant. He just wanted to be heard. So I acknowledged that I heard, his concerns, and it was a great drive. We had this amazing, few minutes together where it wasn't this tense, awful, both of us rolling our eyes feeling. It was really cool. And I can't tell you that I planned that at all. It just happened in the moment, which is what I think is so key, is to just trust that your wisdom's going to guide you to go the right way or say the right thing, do the right thing in that moment that you need it.
So how do you erase what they would feel anyway? For instance, his remembrance was that normally you all are back and forth. So do you have to repeat that over and over again, that just your listening, which will maybe erase away that was something that you all argued about? I mean,
well, honestly, every moment's different. So I can't remember if we have had to do that again. If I didn't make a conscious effort. I'm sure he's complained since, but in that situation made me more aware that, okay, I don't need to engage in the arguing, but I don't remember it being a difficult ride ever since.
And I was thinking, my son is not what I say or feeling, living or working the job that I think he can work. He graduated from Chapel Hill, and he's been he's not a corporate American man or what have you. So even when I stop talking about employment and maybe going to an employment agency, I still think he feels that I'm not necessarily happy, the fact that he doesn't live up to what maybe I think he should or whatever.
He thinks you think.
Yeah, so even though I stopped talking about it, that's what I say, how do you erase that away?
Yeah.
Because we don't talk about it
You have no control over what he's thinking anyway, so you can't control what you're erasing from his memory, or you know what I'm saying?
I'm just wondering about if he's feeling more safe about the whole employment thing, because now I'm not discussing it with him. You know what I'm saying?
Do you remember that thing that Steve Irwin said? Like they can feel.
They can feel.
They can feel, that's what I'm saying.
So
He's gonna
as
feel
long-
even less.
Yeah.
That's what I'm feeling bad about.
Well, and I think it's the more you realize that your feelings are coming from you and have no, they're not from anything on the outside. They're coming from you. They're just yours. You kind of get the sense that, oh, I'm making that up too. Like the idea that he needs a better job, that's just my preference. Or the idea that the kids shouldn't play the instrument for 1 minute. That's just my preference. And the more you can kind of just see that, and you can't will yourself to see it, but the more you do realize it, the less judgment you have on other people, because that's just you. Like, why would she think the same exact thing that I think about that? If I can create all of this and have all these opinions, then certainly all you guys can have your own opinions, right? And they look just as real.
There's also your ideal that you've determined. I'm sure your principal has told you they need to be engaged the entire time, so forth and so on. So you've had some help in developing the ideal classroom, what your image is. I know.
I like you said help. You've had some help with your expectations.
Been voluntold what the expectations are by your principal. However, you have built in your own brain, this is what my classroom would look like if it were highly effective, is probably what you're accustomed to hearing. You have those ideas in your brain. And so when there's a squeak after you said not to play, that's not the ideal. But it might be pretty darn close to the idea for second graders. And maybe it's a little bit farther away from the idea for fifth graders. So there's a whole piece of this that you created what you want to see. But I think, and I've had this conversation with my music teacher before, who, and this is not the exact situation, who was so concerned about the behavior of students that he missed what was happening in his classroom. And what was happening in his classroom was his classroom changed from students who didn't want to participate to students who were making noises with the instruments. Now, I noticed it because the girl that I call the queen bee on campus was a 7th grade girl who would beat up anyone. And she often looked for reasons to do so, but this particular day, I go in and there are students gathering their instruments, and she was sitting with her coronet on her thigh, waiting. She wanted it. I had never seen that kid want anything we had except lunch. She wanted it. So I'm saying to him, yep, those two were messing around when they were getting their, their clarinets. This one was doing this, but did you notice Shirley? I don't know what she was doing. I said, let me show you what she was doing. If you can get her, you can get any of them. And the point is, you want them to want to play. If you can take some of your emotion out of it, and that's what you think it means, right? Because your emotion is coming from what you think it means. They're so I don't like disrespect, I think you said. If you can understand that when they're going toot, what is that?
Fun.
Yeah, just having fun.
They want to play.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, you might have one or two who's saying, watch me get Miss Heather.
Yeah.
For sure that's going to happen as well. But for the most part, they want to play. So that's what you hold before them. Who's going to play? Who's going to be the first group? I need people who are ready and who have not touched their lips to those recorders yet. Who do I have? Boom, 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 boom. I see my first group of players. Oh, I heard you. I think, sorry, you have to wait till next go round. You've removed the emotion out of it, and now there's some natural consequence that you deliver when they haven't done what they're supposed to do. That's about expectation, and you deal it and you do it. And you deal that out without emotion, nonchalantly. So sorry, Heather, you don't get to play right now, but you do.
I was wondering if you could speak to engaging youth that are on the opposite end, not the defiant ones, not the kids that are the obvious troublemakers or the queen bees, but maybe the kids that you're trying to eke out, or the children that you're trying to truly engage. How do you go about being in that space so it feels like it might be different, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's. Is there a
magic pill?
Thank you, yes.
Yes,
They're
it's right
magic pill
here.
for everything.
It's 52 cards and a
3 o'clock.
yeah, that's it. Well, and I'll tell you, I cheat because I do magic with kids, and so it does help with.
You
It
literally have
does.
a trick.
I literally do have a trick. But I will tell you that it doesn't all. I mean, it doesn't always engage them. You know, I mean, it's just a tool. It's not, you know, it's not doing it right. Being patient and again, what you were saying about expectations. I mean, if you step back and look at it, if you're feeling frustrated or impatient, it's just the distance between what you expect and what you get. So if you're expecting that, okay, by now she needs to open up, and she's not, then you're going to have that degree of impatience or frustration. But so what we tend to do is we tend to try to get them to meet what we expect instead of lowering I mean that not in a negative way to lower the expectation, but being real about where things are and you just never know. I had a kid one time, I asked him a question and he shut down on me, and it was about 30 minutes of me just sitting there with him being silent, and I wasn't frustrated, and eventually I think he finally realized that I'm going to have to say something. And then he opened up. And so I think it's a hot cold game that you have to you play around with. I think you go into the interaction with this curiosity, as you were saying, and this almost like a scientist, you know, like, all right, let's see let's try this today and see what happens. And oh, I fell flat on my face, you know, what are we going to do next? Let's try something new. And you've got this learning spirit about it instead of this expectation of, well, I'm not doing good, or they're not doing good, or they need to open up to me, or we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. And if they feel that, you were saying they can feel it. If it means a lot to you to help them, you'll get resistance or you'll get politeness. And politeness isn't any better, because what happens is you think you're doing great, and they're telling you what you want to hear, and it's this unholy alliance. I'll tell you what, you tell me what I want to hear, all right, and then I'm gonna let you go, and then we'll move, and then they continue the behavior. So you're able to get genuine and real. They're able to be more real with you if you're not. If your well-being is not on the line, if the kids know that their behavior is not going to ruin your day, then you've got more power within you to be creative, to handle whatever comes your way. If they know that they can push your buttons or they can shut down and frustrate you, then they got you.
That's
Helen?
the magic pill.
That's the magic pill, yes. Helen?
We had a young man when we first started doing this school.
Horizon.
I couldn't think of the name.
Horizon.
That he always lashes out, and he just wanted to see how far he could go. And we were new on campus, and he just walked in. He says, "I'm just gonna cuss these ladies out," and I said, "I'm just gonna bless you." And he said. He was like, he didn't know what to say. He was like, so he went out the room and he came back, Miss, I'm so sorry I disrespected you. And we've been friends ever since.
Wow.
Hey, Miss, you know, if I'm crossing, hey, Miss. And he was waiting for that defiance, to come back. And I said it just as loud as he did. So he just knew it was on. And he would stop dead in his track, and I'm just gonna bless you. And he was, wait a minute, she wasn't supposed to say that. So sometimes just taking him out of that zone. And he went out and walked around for a couple minutes and came back in, and he apart, and we've not had a problem with him. And that was last year. And this year when we came back and we saw him, hey, Miss, and it was the same. And then another kid that you were saying, that quiet one. And that's where that deep listening is where I think this is kind of supposed to be going a little bit. So, but
We're deep listening to
you're
each
deep
other.
listening.
That's what we're-
It's deep listening. This little boy would never, he cut up, but he was really what I was feeling. Something's not right. Anytime we ask him to write something, we have workbooks that we do. And I noticed that every time it was time to do a workbook thing, he would act up. And then, so it hit me, I don't think he could read or write. It's something deeper than is going on. And so the next time that we were doing something, I went over to him and I said, you want me to help you with this? And I started helping him, and now we have no problem. So now he'll ask one of us, and I picked up on it, that it wasn't that he was just cutting up, but now we'll help him. Surveys or whatever we do, I go help him. You know, or he'll ask now for help, where he probably never would have asked for help. So sometimes that quietness is they're struggling with something.
That was the.
I think it's just like Jamie said, is patience. I mean, some kids just don't want to open up, or they're so used to, like, there's a girl at this campus that didn't like you, made you leave the class at the first class, right?
Oh yeah, hey.
But and then also another mentor told her that she wanted her to die.
Mhm.
And 6 months later, it is honestly this other girl that she said, I want you to die. Like, are you cold? Good. I hope you freeze to death. Like, that's how she would speak to her for a good 6 months. And it's Ashley is a mentor in her office. It's her favorite. Like, she cannot wait to go to Horizons to see her now. And they have such a good relationship.
And now she hugging on me. I mean, she went to me at the end of the school year and said, you know what? I'm so sorry. You know, I didn't want to be, but you really nice. I was like, well, thank you. And so now when she sees me, she's hugging me. I mean, and it's just it. And it wasn't nothing to do with me. It was just where she, and I was respectful of her with it.
And I also think when it comes to listening, kids are so used to whatever their defense is, either shut down or act out.
Mm-hmm.
It shuts adults off very quickly. Not many adults will give them the patience of listening. Truly,
I
one
just
thing
love
Jamie said
No, we're taking it so personally.
to us,
We're children, we're
Yeah.
children in our adult bodies.
That's right.
I know, at least that's my experience. I take it so personally.
And one
Instead
thing-
of getting my ego out.
Yeah.
This one here.
Oh, I thought you were gonna do my hair later.
No.
You don't need to.
But one thing that Jamie said when we were all talking about this that's really just stood with me was when you're having conversations with youth, have conversations to understand rather than to be understood.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, you want to listen
That's important.
until they feel understood, not until you think you understand. And oftentimes we think we understand. I know where you're coming from. I know. And the way that you can tell if they feel understood is that they start to calm down. They settle down. We'd have girls at our at the hospital in the residential program and they're like throwing their food and they're like, you're just here for a paycheck. You don't care about me. And you show up and you're like, so you're saying that everybody, you mean, so nobody here is here? Well, I'm not talking about you. And then they start, and you'll notice that because like you were saying, it's not gonna change me. You know, it's not gonna affect me one way or the other. But in that moment, if I'm in that kind of space, I become like a mirror, and they start to see how they're acting.
So you're
And-
active listening, turning it,
Well-
or is
well,
that
it's-
too clinical?
It's clinical, but that's okay. It's really more, it's not something you're doing. It is something that happens. Young children are really good at listening. That's why they're able to pick up language and learn and they don't have a notepad learning phrases. They're just absorbing life. When you're in this state that we talked about earlier about the connection and that state where your mind is free of all this thinking, you hear the deeper point that they're trying to make. You hear what they're trying to say, but it's not something you're doing. It's more of a state. It's listening as a state, not as a strategy or a technique.
Yeah.
And it's when you listen to music. Have you ever had a song that you loved And then you actually listen to read the words, and you're like, that's the stupidest song I've ever heard. But you love the song because you get this feeling from it, okay? And so then what happens is that from that space, they feel understood, and questions come to your mind to ask, deeper questions. So I had a kid one time who had an anger problem. He had gotten in a fight at school, and so I said, well, why did you get so angry? He said, well, they were, no, and he said the kids kept calling me ugly. My peers were calling me ugly. And then it occurred to me, one reason why I love listening is because it's an area that they say that you love to teach the stuff that you have trouble learning. And my wife always gives me a hard time, I can't believe you're teaching listening. And I'm like, well, maybe one day I'll learn something from it. So, but in this particular day, on this, I don't know if it was just it was a leap year and it was full moon, but for whatever reason, I was really listening well that day, and I had the thought, like, well, why is it a problem that they called you ugly? And he said, well, I can't get a girlfriend if people think I'm ugly. Now, I could have stopped when he said they were calling me ugly and said, okay, he's being bullied. Let's help him with his self-esteem. Right? But that extra question, why is it a problem that they called you ugly? It wasn't a self-esteem thing. He was worried about his social status with the girls, right? That was his concern. That's a different point. That's a different direction. And so oftentimes when we're listening, we stop too early and we grab the low-hanging fruit and start running with it instead of asking deeper questions. If you can ever get a chance to hear Linda Pransky talk about listening, she is the master. And I'll never forget one time I spent time with her, and she asked me what I wanted to get out of our time. And I said, I wanted to be a better listener. And after she listened to me for a while, she looked at me and said, do you really want to be a better listener, or you just want people to think you're a good listener? And I was like, it was like I was naked right there. But the whole point of it is that even when you're when you have this intent to listen, it's not about you, it's about the child, and you're just getting their world. And then things occur to you, like pulling the badge out, or walking away, or making a joke, or being very firm. I mean, you're guided in that moment, and they'll feel it. Their feelings will tell you.
Brock's about to chew his finger off back there.
Well, I just had a couple thoughts. So I love the question earlier and about children who are not as engaged, or maybe, a lot of the kids, squeaky wheel gets the degree, whatever, the kids who are, you got acting out and you acting in kids. And the disengaged kids a lot of times go under the radar because their behavior is fine, right? And we do a camp for adopted kids in the summer, and to the kids who are really rambunctious and just all over the place, and we got to watch those kids. But what about the kids who are just sitting back, maybe not participating, not saying a whole lot, whatever? And if you look at what was going on, if we were able to see what was happening in their heads, whether they felt safe or not, they could be just as revved up, right? Just as much as the people who were acting out. That's what depression and anxiety and kids who self-harm, and a lot of that it's inward facing, but it's still a very revved up mindset, and there's still a lot of tumultuous kind of stuff going on in their mind. And to the extent that you're present is when you notice those kids too. And especially in classroom settings or camp settings, settings where there's a lot going on, it's like, am I aware of everyone? And I know as a trainer, we address the people who are making eye contact and asking a lot of questions. And what about the people who are not as engaged? Are we aware of everyone in the room? Like, those are the things that is really the fruit of how present you are. And that's something that, from a deep listening standpoint too, is, okay, am I listening to the ones that are getting attention? And am I listening to the ones who are doing everything they can to avoid tension? You know? I also had a story I just want to share real quick that I love about listening deeper past the surface level. But a couple of weeks ago, we were going to the beach and we were super excited about it as a family. And then the hurricanes were coming through. The plans were canceled or postponed. So my 7-year-old, he was heartbroken about it. And he just was moping and, you know. And so I was trying to help them understand that hurricanes are not cool. Like, you don't want to go to the beach with a hurricane. It was just a category 1. It was like, so I got them on my phone, pulled up pictures of like a category 1. So not like where it's leveled or anything, but just water in the road, trees, you know, being blown, and like just trying to give them an idea of this. See, this is what the beach would look like. I want you to understand the beach. The sand would sting, and like it's just not going to work. And he just didn't listen, didn't care. He's, you know. And then my wife, she's sharp, you know. She just was like, okay. What were you looking forward to doing? Why are you, like, what were you wanting to do at the beach? And he said, going to the hotel. She's like, oh, so you wanted to stay in a hotel. That's what you were looking forward to. And he's like, yeah. He didn't care about the beach. He liked the condo. He liked seeing his cousins. And what goes along with going to the beach wasn't playing in the sand. And so I was totally projecting, right? What I like doing at the beach, or what I think that he likes doing. And I was filling in the blanks, and it wasn't true. I'm like, oh, crap, we can go to a hotel tonight. Like, you know, or we're going to see our cousins this weekend. And he was fine, you know. So it's just it's so ordinary. It's not, I mean, it's profound, but it's so simple and it's so everyday that we just, are we listening? Are we more curious, or are we filling in the blanks?
And there's infinite opportunities to listen better. You walk out of this room and you will have immediately have opportunities to listen better. I'll go on this kick where, okay, today I'm going to be really deeply listening. By lunch, I've totally forgotten. Okay? And I mean, because it's just, and what we mean when you hear that, it just means listening with less on your mind. I would say nothing on your mind, but I don't want to set the bar too high. Just less on your mind, you know, and you'll notice it. You'll notice it because when you start thinking about other things while they're talking, your judgments, when you start doing that, that's a sign that you're not listening. So it's okay. You get a pass. Everybody does it. Everybody does it. So it's not like, you know, we got this. But the times when you do it though, man, it really, you can see the potential to have new things come to mind that you never believed.
One thing that I did when I learned this was that I beat up on myself for things I was doing wrong. And I was so guilty, especially with my kids. My mom was a beater, you know, back in the day, just see you look at me, just everything. And so I was that kind of mom. I had turned to that mom. And when I learned this, and I was like, I don't like that. And then when I would do it, I'd go in the room and cry because I had to hit them. You know, and then they tell me nowadays, you weren't hurting us. You know, you just I really wasn't because I didn't want to hit them anyway. But they told me, but in my heart, I was killing them, right? So I learned this understanding. I started punishing and take it away. You know, put that game up, put that phone up. Those kind of little things. And I started feeling bad. But it took me a long time to forgive myself for how I had acted for that first 38 years of my life. You know, I learned this like 22 years ago. I'm 60 now. So that was my biggest thing when I learned this. I beat myself up. And I finally learned how to realize, even with me, like I do with others, I was doing the best I could with what I knew at that time. And when you know better, you do better.
Yeah.
So I don't try to go back and fix what I didn't do. I just started doing better. That's what I thought.
It's great.
I love that.
And,
When you know better, you do better.
and,
Any other thoughts or comments or? Yes.
Dawn Blueberry. So I work at a school. I'm the math teacher, and I go into a classroom and am teaching the lesson.
The school was really kind of dying in that the schools around it, well, this school's in a really tough neighborhood, tough situation. And you're not from Florida, are you? Well, we did it there too. As the school did okay with the school grade, like got a C, we were not making adequate yearly progress, meaning the subgroups were not making enough progress and not scoring well enough. So there were sanctions, and those sanctions, the best and the brightest from the school, and when I say best and brightest, I mean the students whose parents were engaged enough to look into their backpack and pull out a letter that said, well, you can go to a better school. Those students left. So we went from 750 students to 350 students. And guess which one stayed behind? And I'm really not blaming the students that were there, but it was just a really difficult situation. And what happened is you had a staff who felt like it was us against them. You know, we had conversations about how can we get them to take the test seriously? You know, how can we get them to come to school? How can we? And there just came a point where it was just not a good situation for folks to be in, where they felt like we're going to be judged based on this small group of students, a lot of whom are not ready for school. And that does not really reflect our effort. Within the last year that I was there, though, I don't know how we got to this point. It certainly didn't come from me. Somehow, someone began to say, you know, we're going to give them the best that we have. We noticed also that our stress was causing us to want to focus on negative stuff. And, you know, those students who were struggling, we sat around and we talked about plans to keep him in check. We're going to do to make sure he doesn't. How we're going to keep her from it. And that just was sort of feeding all the negative as well. While we had students who were not reaching proficiency, they were growing by leaps and bounds. They were still the lowest level, level 1, but they were a level 1 that grew pretty close to level 2. And even though they didn't get to level 3, they were now a level 2. That was a significant jump up from level 1. We missed that for 2 years because we were so concerned with the other measurables and the problems that we thought were causing students not to do well. So I just caution you to pay attention to what you can do. Plan it and do it to the best of your ability. You'll find some peace in that as you find those students who are hearing you, those students who are getting it, those students are growing.
Yeah, and I would also just say that your expectations, like what are your expectations? That the expectations have been passed down to you. Do you have high expectations too, or are you, because they're given to you, you're just buying them? Well, because if you're feeling stressed about it, you're either feeling stressed because you have a high expectation or you're taking their expectations to heart and take them personally, right? And so, I mean, there are probably teachers who are like, look, I'm going to do the best I can, and they're going to have to get over it, or they're going to have to, or, you know, like they just know in their heart that they've done the best they can do. And so, and they come to peace with it. So now my message isn't to tell you how to think about it. That's not the point. But because it's inside out, even expectations you can't really feel from someone else, like pressure you can't feel from someone else. Like you're still feeling the way that your mind relates to that. Is it a challenge, or is it this sucks? You know, and that's a day-to-day thing too. But So it is possible to come to peace with it, and not based on the grades themselves.
That does speak to the fear,
Mhm.
can breed fear as well. And so like,
Yeah.
you've got, I know if you have like leadership in an organization and they use fear-based leadership and they pass it down, and the managers a lot of times, they'll use fear and coercion to get
Yes.
their way because they're being bullied and, and so on. And so you can see that within other groups.
Absolutely.
And so if they're using fear to try to motivate you and you're feeling pressure, which is still happening within you, right? But you're feeling pressured. And then you mentioned something earlier in your comment about, and I guess they can sense that, or they can feel that from like your investment in how they do. Is that promoting fear in them, or is it motivating them? So the less fear you have, then the more that can unleash well-being in you and also in them, regardless of what leadership or whoever is saying.
Yeah, it's better to have a leader that there are organizations that have really poor leadership, and there are people who don't buy into the fear, and they just and so that's possible. And then again, just even the assumption that kids like grades. I used to be real perfectionistic growing up, and grades were a big deal to me. And then when I realized that like today, it really doesn't matter that I made a C on that science test in 7th grade or whatever. And I was just ripped apart by it. And so I think it's about perspective. Like what do the grades really mean? It's not a sign of their worth. It's not it's just being clear about what are we really measuring. And, we could probably spend a whole philosophical discussion on that, but there are a lot of parents that are putting pressure on their kids because they think that their grades in 7th grade are going to determine whether they go to Harvard or not. And so there's a lot of pressure that they're getting from their kids.
See, it's all an inside-out job. The more you see, even expectations are completely made up. And if you show up in the classroom and connect with kids, they're gonna learn because that's naturally how they're built. But if we have expectations of outcomes that we pre-plan and we think we can control that, then that's just like a mess waiting to happen.
More clouds for your weather.
Yeah. No, we don't time. Oh, it's about time. Well, I've really enjoyed this. It's just good.
Fireside chattles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably even more so tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
So just a reminder that we're going to be around, and if you want to
Give an autograph.
right?
James is giving them out.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm charging $10.
Yeah. Yeah, he's the voice from the Arby's commercials.
Yeah.
Man.
We have the meats.
Yeah. There it is.
Thought I didn't know my lines.
I know. Well, it's funny because we were on a call and they said James couldn't make it. I said, oh, he's probably doing a commercial shoot right now. But it was great to hang out with you guys, and I love this. There's a real feel of connection, and I feel like I'm learning stuff just hearing from you guys. I think it's awesome.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.